Not yet, not yet. You're at the end.
Okay, seeing none, we'll get right into the resolutions. First resolution for this evening is authorizing public hearing regarding 8-year review of Chautauqua County and Agricultural District 8.
Hi, I'm Lauren Sharp. I'm a junior planner with the Department of Planning and Development. This resolution is going to set a public hearing for the December legislature meeting, which is on the 18th of December. We're required by state law to have the public hearing to adopt the changes that are recommended by the Ag and Farmland Protection Board.
Has anyone in the committee had an opportunity to look at the
Yep.
resolution?
Yes.
Do we have any questions, committee, on the resolution?
Nope.
Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Carried.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lauren.
Thanks, Lauren. We're doing well. We are on resolution number 2. It states approves the SCQRA review of the 2% watershed occupancy tax grant program projects for 2025. And we have, looks like Dave McCoy is going to be speaking on behalf of the watershed.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Dave McCoy. I work within the Department of Planning. I'm the County Watershed Coordinator. I don't hear well, so please, if you could speak up. Thank you so much. Okay, we're on the renewal of the intermunicipal agreement for, oh, I'm sorry, this is for the watershed.
Yes.
Yeah, we did the initial review because SEQA requires agencies that fund or undertake projects to conduct the environmental review. These projects are all defined as unlisted actions because they're in that window of not being a large project, but still big enough to warrant environmental review by the state legislation. So we've typed them all as unlisted, all 4 of them, and feel that there are no significant environmental impacts associated with them.
Okay. How did you guys, I see 4 listed here. How was the priority of the projects, determined, 1 through 4?
I'm sorry?
How were the projects, determined by priority, 1 through 4?
They were ranked by a review group.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. McCoy?
Dave, yeah, I do, Chairman. The Mayville Lakeside Park Tree and Tourism, that's a Village of Lakewood, Village of Mayville Lakeside Park, is that correct? And that $19,000 is related to tree removal? Is that what that is earmarked for?
I see.
The other 3 are different in scope in terms that they're related to stabilization along waterways. This one here, not that I'm against it, my question would be to you, David, this one is for tree removal. And that's a large canopy and shade, and I'm very familiar with that park. And I don't know if I'm comfortable with the $20,000 for tree removal in Mayville Park. And I know it's a draw, many festivals and activities are utilized using that piece of property.
Well, this project is about replacing trees that have aged out, not necessarily cutting or removing them.
Fair enough.
Question?
Sure, go ahead.
Stabilizing Lake Erie shoreline, that's usually an oxymoron. So what are we doing there? In terms of what are we stabilizing where? On Lake Erie?
I'm really struggling to hear you, I'm sorry.
All right, does it hear me now?
I can now.
All right. What are we stabilizing in Lake Erie? Where? And where are we doing it? Third project.
I'm not getting it.
Lake Erie shoreline, he wants
Yeah.
to know where,
Oh,
where is
I'm
it being
sure.
done?
Yeah,
And
sure
what's
enough.
being done and where?
Yeah, there's 3 spots where the city and Soil and Water want to plant some native vegetation. One is out by Wright Park Beach, and the other is closer to Main Street Beach, and then also up by the lake, the Lake Erie Lighthouse and Veterans Museum.
So a lot in like the Dunkirk area?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
All right.
All right.
Great, great. Do we have any other questions, committee? Go ahead, John.
Yes, I do, Chairman. David, is this work gonna be done by Soil and Water, the tree planting, or is this out to private contractors to bid?
Yes, they'll implement that project.
Soil and Water will implement that project. Will they be using their labor, or is this contracted labor?
Say that again?
Yes. Soil and Water, is Soil and Water gonna be doing the actual labor of planting the trees for these stabilization projects? Or is this something that goes out to a bidding process?
Soil and Water has a list of approved contractors that they approve every year, and they select those from that list.
Fair enough, thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead, Fred.
most of the members of the committee here tonight will probably recall that the committee passed a motion that whatever the group is that's reviewing and ranking these 2% occupancy tax fund projects, that we have a resolution before the end of the year, so we're down to the November and December meeting, naming those people on that review group. So we need that resolution pre-filed for November or December, who the review group is going to be for 2025. So there's no confusion about this. We established pretty much before we passed our motion that the review group is semi-anonymous. So when we ask, geez, who ranked these or how did they get ranked, starting next year we'll know who ranked them. Thank you.
Do we have any concerns or questions? Okay, all those in favor of the resolution?
Aye.
All those opposed? Carried. On to resolution number 3. Is to approve the SEQRA review of the 2% in-lake occupancy tax grant program projects for 2025. David?
Again, this is the other side of the program, the in-lake side. These projects are all really maintenance projects, and as such, they fall into the category of being type 2, which is really not subject to seeker. It's a good practice to run through the process, so you have it in the file in case you're ever questioned, and that's what we've done here.
Okay. So that list again was determined by priority and by the
Yes.
committee? Okay, thank you. Do you have any questions, committee? Yeah.
Chair,
Oh, go ahead, John.
Number 1, Chautauqua Marina. Is that privately owned, that Chautauqua Marina?
The project is owned by the marina and is actually to help support them in their efforts to get a permit to dredge. So it's an engineering study, if you will, which is rarely, if ever, subject to seeker.
David, what would we do if other marinas requested similar funding or help or aid going forward?
Well, the DEC has a pretty rigorous review and permitting process, and it's actually getting a lot more difficult as time goes on with new regulations related to wetlands and the protection of certain endangered species. So these things, oftentimes take a heck of a lot of time and a lot of money, and in some cases, getting through the regulatory process is nearly as expensive as the actual work itself.
And sure, this would be a universal benefit for Chautauqua Lake at number one is Chautauqua Marina, is that correct?
Oh, of course, of course. They sell a lot of boats, a lot of fuel, bring a lot of people in, they rent boats. So it has a demonstrable impact on recreation and tourism opportunities.
Thank you.
Any other questions, committee? Seeing none, all those in favor of the resolution, say aye.
Aye.
Those not in favor? Carried. Resolution number 4 is authorize continued participation in Lake Erie Watershed Protection Alliance.
The Lake Erie Watershed Protection Alliance, or LUPA as we refer to it, is a 3-county agreement, Chautauqua County, Erie County, and Cattaraugus County. This is our 15th year in that partnership. It's time to renew the agreement for another 5 years.
Great. Seems pretty simple. Does anyone have any questions on this? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Carried. David, thank you.
Thank you for indulging me.
Exactly. Okay, we are on to resolution number 5. Is to amend the 2024 budget to implement the Mason-Dixon Park Infrastructure Extension Project using funding from the American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA. Can you please introduce yourself?
Good evening, Nate Aldrich, Economic Development Coordinator with the Department of Planning and Development. And Olivia, just a quick question. The amended version, beautiful, thank you.
This will have to be amended. Okay.
So again, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Mark Geis sends his regrets. He couldn't be with us tonight, so I'm be pinch hitting for him. So as this group may recall, back in June, the legislature appropriated up to $90,000 for environmental due diligence and pre-development activities for the Mason Industrial Park in the town of Ellicott, working with Mr. Larson and others. Our consulting engineer, Clark Patterson Lee, is making a great deal of progress on that effort. And as part of that work, we received some estimates and recommendations from them on costs related to infrastructure improvements to that site, which in addition to the work approved in June, will really help to make the site truly shovel-ready and assist with our marketing efforts and getting a suitable end user there. So our department had recently returned some ARPA funding for a broadband project, so it was good timing to approach the committee, and Mark presented this project, which was well received. Specifically, we're requesting $499,500 in ARPA funding for erosion control, stormwater management, stubbing in a roadway, water, sewer, gas utilities, as well as telecommunication infrastructure. And the only difference in the version that was pre-filed to the amended version laid on your desks, we added an additional resolve clause just to authorize an actual contract between the county and the IDA. The IDA will be performing the work.
Okay.
Any questions?
Pretty
Mr.
straightforward.
Chairman,
Yes, sir. Fred, go ahead.
I don't understand the math of the amended resolution. The intent is that you all would have $999,000 to spend on all these improvements, right?
Jen can speak to the,
Well, what I'm getting at, the new resolved is the executive is authorized to execute an agreement with the county IDA to provide such services in the amount not to exceed $499,500. I don't understand the math.
it is $499,500. The reason, and I would refer to either Jen or on the need for the accounting purpose for the interfund transfer.
Yeah, 'cause it's the interfund and it's also an increase in the revenue and the appropriation. That's on both sides of this. So we're increasing the revenue and the expense.
resolution says the IDA is authorized to provide services not to exceed $499,500.
Correct.
All the work you want done is $999,000.
No.
No, actually, so the way that resolutions like this work when it comes to capital projects, there are transfer accounts that are required when there's money moved from one fund to another, and in this case, it's moving from the A fund to the H fund.
All right.
So what you're I
I understand. The reason that I didn't, originally, Mr. Geis indicated an application for 1 million of ARPA funds. So I deduced from that based on our consultant's estimates, to put in water line, sewer line, storm sewers, so forth, was at least $1 million. Now, this is saying that there will only be authorization for the IDA acting on behalf of the county to spend $500,000.
I can't speak to Mark's comment about $1 million, but I can confirm that the estimates from Clark Patterson Lee were $499,500.
Oh, well, that's good. As some of the legislators know, with the blessing of the chair of the legislature, as Nate has already indicated, a number of us put our heads together to get this 33 acres, we believe, according to the consultant, usable acres out of 60 in the South County Industrial Park. We put our heads together, and the IDA put up half the money and the county put up half the money for the engineer, the consultant, to do all the things necessary in order to move it towards shovel ready. And now, based, we're told, on that important work that's been done the last 3 months or so, that for $500,000 we can move forward with actual work in the ground there. This is a tremendous bargain for the county. We have owned this land, the 60-some acres, since
15 or
Vince Horgan,
16.
20, pardon?
15 or 16 in that
Yeah,
ballpark.
Vince Horgan wisely bought it from Bush Industries. We've now moved this forward. It was a very modest investment that the IDA and the county made this year in it for another $500,000. When you divide that into 33 acres, you're looking at an investment of maybe $15,000 an acre. Some of you will remember the first phase of the Ripley land purchase was $32,000 an acre just to buy the land. This is roughly $15,000 an acre to wind up with a shovel-ready site that a company or one or two companies could build on. So this is very good news. Happy to see that it's not thought to take $1 million. Another $500,000 would get us a long way toward allowing any company to come and apply for a building permit from the town of Ellicott and create some jobs for us. So, thank you, Nate.
Thank you.
I think it's money well spent.
One little
Go ahead, Fred.
financial accounting question. When I see a number like 499, being a corporate controller, I ask, is there some threshold at 500,000 or over $1 million that requires a different level of accounting or approval?
No.
So
Those were estimates based, again, from Clark Patterson Lee, and we'll follow the IDA's procurement policy and contracting for the engineering services and actual bids for construction.
sure. Just when I see a number like that, you know.
Red flags.
It does raise the question, so. Okay, we have the resolution on our desk. All those in favor of the amended resolution as presented this evening?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Carried. Nate, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. We're under resolution number 6. It is requesting Governor Hochul delay the implementation of the new proposed NYSDEC wetlands regulations until all issues can be fully understood and addressed. Can you please introduce yourself, sir?
Pierre Chagnon, Chairman of the Legislature. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity to address this proposed resolution.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
The legislators who represent areas around the inland lakes in Chautauqua County, who are all listed as requesters of this resolution, two of whom are with us tonight on this committee, are proposing this resolution asking the governor to delay the implementation of the wetlands regulations that are still being developed, because there are many questions, concerns, and potential issues regarding these that have not yet been fully addressed. So there's a lot of concern in the communities. There's a lot of concern among the property owners and landowners. And so we felt that we don't know what the best answers are. We don't fully understand the proposed regulations, partly because we haven't seen the proposed regulations. So rather than express our opinions about what we think about what might happen, we thought it best to represent our constituents by requesting the governor to delay the implementation of the regulations until these questions and concerns can be fully addressed.
Very, very wise decision, I believe. So, thank you for that. Do we have any questions, committee?
No, Chair, just to make
Go
a
ahead.
point,
Go ahead.
I do believe the majority of the communities, the towns and villages that surround Chautauqua Lake have made a commitment similar to this, that they don't agree, and all answers have not been, or excuse me, all questions have not been answered regarding these proposed wetland regulations. So I fully support this, and thank you.
Okay, great. Anyone else have any?
So these regulations are still under development?
Yes, sir.
All right. I think this is absolutely fine. I would almost add we would hope that these regulations do not amount to a taking or a regulatory taking.
That's one of the concerns that has been raised very clearly, yes.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions, committee? Hearing none, all those in favor of the resolution?
Aye.
Those opposed? Carried.
Thank you.
Mr. Shagnon, thank you very much. Okay, number 7, we were gonna have a discussion on the update regarding the North County Chautauqua Water District. That's gonna be pushed off until November. I know there was a list of questions that was submitted by Legislator Larson, which I believe was answered by Kitty in Finance. And I believe there was some other questions that Mr. Larson had, but we have the new protocol for the department heads for any questions that need to be followed. So we won't be touching base on that one until November's meeting. That's acceptable?
Well, either you'll let me ask a few questions now, or I'll use privilege of the floor. It's up to you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, I think we already had the privilege of the floor, didn't we?
Pardon?
We already did privilege of the floor. We already had that in the beginning of the meeting.
So we're gonna have a presentation on windmills in Lake Erie, but you're not gonna let me ask a few questions about
Well,
Kitty's answers to my
The department head is
written
not,
questions?
are you referring to the questions, the new questions you have, or the questions that were already answered?
There are questions about her answers.
Okay, well, I think those need to be directed right to Kitty, or they need to be followed by the new protocol. Is that accurate?
Yeah. Unfortunately, Kitty couldn't
Right,
be here
she
tonight.
couldn't be
so-
here, so that's the reason why we're putting it off to November, so. So I'm sorry for any inconvenience on that, but we're gonna forego that till November. Okay?
No, it isn't okay. This is the public's business,
Okay.
and basically, a independently elected legislator by the people of the north side of Jamestown is being told that he can't ask questions about this county water district.
That's not true, that's not accurate.
Well, I can't ask them tonight.
Yes, because Kitty's not here to ask directly on the questions that you may have on the answers that she already provided. I'd rather have her here so she can answer those
Well, I
questions.
know she's gonna be here next month.
Okay, well then we can address it
And,
next month.
But she doesn't know what my questions are.
Would it be a problem to ask her those questions when she is
Well, she'll need
available?
time to think it over.
Can those questions be submitted to Mr. Shagnon on the,
Well, I don't think that alleged protocol is binding on the 19 independently elected legislators. None of us are here with permission of the county executive or permission of the chair of the legislature. Every one of us was elected by the people. Some of us were elected in a contested election. The people voted for me over a Republican incumbent legislator. I know there are people here in Mayville that wish that hadn't happened, but I'm an independently elected public officer, and I don't have to raise my hand to go to the bathroom, and I don't have to let a series of people know what I'm interested in finding out about county government. And when a citizen on a county road in Stockton can call and ask to talk to the department head about when the county is going to get out to do digging of their ditch in front of their home, but a county legislator can't do that, got to go through a protocol. I don't think that's binding on any of us.
well, I think that's what's in place right now, and I'd like to follow the protocol if that's okay with you. So,
This has developed into it's an odd coincidence that my written questions on this North County Water District, following up on the state comptroller, were delivered at this meeting on September 18, 2024. And we all got a text message or an email that as of September 30, there's a procedure for independently elected county legislators to ask questions of department heads or their staff. Isn't that an interesting coincidence?
it just very well be, it just may be.
Legislator Larson, that protocol was developed well before your letter. It was developed by the leadership of the legislature in consultation with the county attorney's office, and your leadership of your caucus were present when we developed that protocol, well before your questions were submitted.
I understand that, Mr. Chairman, but it's ignoring the fact we have had legislators here that are not Republicans or Democrats. We had a registered conservative elected as such from Fredonia 30, 40 years ago. So to say that some caucus leaders can reach an agreement that binds some individual legislator, I firmly disagree. And I don't understand why this county government has suddenly worried about legislators asking questions. I don't understand that at all.
Well, you could speak to your caucus leaders, and I'm sure they would be happy to share with you their perspective on why this was developed. And I would be happy to share with you my perspective. I would do that privately. I would not do that in public.
Well, there's a lot about this government that good news is public news, bad news is private, confidential, kept as quiet as possible. There was, as far as I know, there was not any discussion last year about the state comptroller's rip-roaring review of the handling of the North Chautauqua County Water District. I don't think there was any public discussion of it until March or April of our meeting, Mr. Chairman, where I asked a few questions.
Yep.
And then finally, we were to have a presentation here in October on
Right.
this important matter.
And unfortunately,
And I
Kitty
consented
cannot be here to do it.
To your request that we wait till November when Kitty can be here, totally appropriate. The problem is, why can't I ask questions such as, why is the calculation, the overnight interest or rate over these years on this money when the 5.2 million's been sitting out there for over a year? We got a banker here who can answer the question at M&T Bank. If I had deposited 5.2 million with you a year ago, would you give me a 1-year CD rate on it instead of having me have a passbook savings? And how much difference in interest would it have been? 3.5%, 4%?
Yeah, depends what you asked for, I guess.
You know, in general,
Yeah.
a 1-year CD a year ago was 4 or 5%.
Probably not that high, but the passbook savings is even less. But I mean, yeah, I get your point, but yes, I would do whatever you
So
asked.
the comptroller was concerned that our taxpayers not be subsidizing financially this one district. By using this overnight rate on 5.2 million they've had for over a year, we're subsidizing that money. We should be getting what we could earn on a 1-year treasury or whatever. And I think our banker understands the point, and our businessman from Westfield understands the issue.
You know, over a year ago, it was better than 5% for me. I'm no genius.
So,
Well, I think going forward, the questions that you want to be able to ask Kitty, if you can submit them, is that something you'd be willing to do? So,
well, yes, of
so
course,
before November's
I'll
meeting, we
submit
can
them
have
in-
the answers when she's here. I think
I'll
it's,
submit them in writing to her and give her a whole month to come up with the answers.
okay. Thanks for that. I do appreciate
welcome.
it. So, okay. The last item on the agenda is other. I'm going to be introducing the group from Cawtile.
We have some handouts here.
Okay, I'll make sure I get the handouts too. Thank you. Okay, guys, have a seat. Please introduce yourselves when you get seated. Place up front. Thank you. Right, go ahead, please. Introduce yourselves.
Hi, I'm Patty Meckes. Thank you for the opportunity to present tonight. I'm from the group called Cawtile. That stands for Citizens Against Wind Turbines in Lake Erie. Our group has been together for about 14 years, and our goal is to preserve and protect Lake Erie. We're a proactive group. We've been together 14 years. We consist of regular people like you and I, boaters, fishermen, environmentalists. We have an aquatic biologist, electrical engineers, and people who just simply care about Lake Erie. In 2011, there was a NYSERDA report, and again in 2022. And the two studies that came up with the exact same conclusion, that it was not feasible to put turbines in Lake Erie. On the 2022 report, it was a little different, and they followed it up by comma, not at this time, not feasible, not at this time. Well, we know with New York State, they don't stop at anything, and when they make up their minds, and given the fact that the report was 10 years sooner, we decided to group again and get together with all of us and figure out just what we're going to do here. So we held meetings, we held rallies, we had gone to environmental meetings, and it's just to educate the public. Our group is proactive. Lake Erie, if we put those wind turbines in Lake Erie, it will disturb the lake bed and the contamination, suspending heavy metal toxins in our water that cannot be filtered. So for these reasons, we are fighting to preserve Lake Erie. There's no sense to destroy it before and then have to go backwards to clean it all up, spend taxpayer dollars, millions and millions and millions. But who knows if it would even be able to be remediated. So I'm going to turn it over to Dave Adrian.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is David Adrian. I'm an aquatic biologist and fisheries biologist. I'm also a charter captain out in Lake Erie, so I've got a lot of incentive to find out what was happening with this project, and I'd like to go over some of the technical aspects of it. Initially, there was a project proposed by Mitsubishi. There was just a short assembly given to the town of Evans, sort of unsolicited. But at that time, we got a lot of information that we probably wouldn't have had access to otherwise. Their plan was to place over 100 wind turbines in Lake Erie from Buffalo to Dunkirk. At the time, they were 460 feet tall, but the newer ones proposed could be over 1,000 feet tall. Taller at this point than the Seneca One Tower downtown. As close as 0.6 miles apart from one another, and about 2 to 8 miles from shore, in some cases all the way to the Canadian border, which is more like 12 miles. It's possible, based on regulations, that there would be a 3,200-foot no-go zone around each one in diameter. This would prevent recreational and commercial traffic in that area. We have engineers who have done pretty detailed calculations indicating that the existing cost of $20 per megawatt hour for these wind turbines would in fact be accelerated to $135 per megawatt hour. We were very surprised to see that. However, in the NYSERDA report that was more recently published, they echoed those exact same calculations to within $3. So the cost increase just to do the project was kind of ridiculous. The turbine bases themselves and the high voltage cables would have to be buried into the sediment. I was one of the original researchers that detected zebra mussels in Lake Erie. And as you probably know, they do a great job at filtering water. In the process, they're able to filter up to 40 liters of water per day each, and there's trillions and trillions of them in Lake Erie. We all celebrated in the mid-90s when we started to see water clarity improve significantly. It was great to see down to 30 feet at some point. There was a lot of studies done because there was some suspicion that there might be other problems associated with this high filtration rate. Sure enough, there is evidence to show where the zebra mussels also concentrated a lot of the, as Patty said, heavy metals, dioxins, PCBs, and so forth, into the sediments through a process of what's called pseudofeces. They actually dump what they don't want to eat down at the bottom. In that process, that has now accumulated in the sediments to the point where it's measurable. First it was detectable, now it's measurable in the first 8 inches or so of the sediment. So that's okay, let's just sort of forget about that and pretend that it's not there. But if it weren't for the fact that these proposed wind turbines, either in the floating version, where they would have attached cables down to mounting structures down below, or if they were to actually burrow down up to 100 feet into the sediment, they would simply disturb these sediments. That was the red flag for us, because 11 million people get their drinking water from Lake Erie. So we looked into it further, and sure enough, that appears to be the situation. Whether they're floating or whether they're fixed, they would be disturbing the bottom, not only to mount them, but also to jet plow to the shoreline to run the cables. In that process, we know, if you're involved with Lake Erie at all, you know there's a prevailing current from west to east heading right towards our water intakes in Erie County. So that was an immediate secondary concern that we would have issues with that. Obviously down the Niagara River and into Lake Ontario until it became eventually undetectable. But the point is, with that much concern for 11 million people's drinking water, there was a lot of red flags. Secondarily, in any of these wind turbines, and they're wind turbines, not windmills, in the wind turbines, they actually have a typical issue with leaking lubricants. In a terrestrial situation, that may not be as detected, but in an aquatic situation, of course, they're lubricants, they'll float to the surface. The concern there, obviously, same wind, prevailing currents, bringing the toxins right to our water intakes again, but in this case, in the form of lubricants. So, on the leading edge of each blade, it's just a fiberglass resin combination. It has microplastics and PFAS chemicals. They've been studied for years, and they actually travel at about a rate of about 200 miles per hour. In the process, they erode. So it's called leading edge erosion. It's been estimated that in a typical wind turbine about these size, there would be about 6 pounds of this microplastic created every year, enough to fill a large room.
Which is a forever chemical which cannot be filtered out in filtration or in our bodies.
There was a study in the Netherlands that looked at the same sort of impact on wind turbines adjacent to a water body. In that case, they traced it through the food web into the people who were eating the fish and so forth. But not only that, there was a correlation between that and birth defects in the women surrounding the lake. So there's a direct correlation between this sort of contamination with leading edge erosion and issues ashore. We are in a very significant flyway for not only migrating bats and birds, but even things like monarch butterflies. And someone might say, well, who cares about monarch butterflies? We were stopped from creating a new Peace Bridge because it was indicated that some of the birds would fly into this new Peace Bridge and kill themselves. With the existing mortality that's documented from wind turbines, you can only imagine the impact it would have on those. We all know what it's like to have a winter ice storm in Lake Erie area, and if you've seen any of the buildings or structures along shore, you know what can happen. They talk about job creation in these scenarios. That's in the construction process, maybe many would be brought aboard. However, the NYSERDA studies showed that there would be not more than 45 people hired to run this whole project. In an event of an emergency, just try to picture what it would be like to try to service these things out in our lake. It's one of the reasons why they're not used in freshwater systems. There's underwater archaeological sites. There are more shipwrecks in Lake Erie than some of the other Great Lakes. If we were to disturb one of these areas, it would be immediately stopped under the laws that prevent that. But there has been no environmental impact studies, certainly no underwater archaeological studies, and for the most part, there has been no talk whatsoever about how that would even be achieved. Border Patrol set up around Sturgeon Point area has already indicated that there would be an issue with detecting. You see on radar, you can see the terrestrial wind turbines and how they cause interference in radar. It's crucial for us in terms of border control and safety, and they could be definitely negatively impacted. If they were put near the shipping lanes, it would be an issue. Obviously, the aesthetics are important. We just recently did a study to do a survey, and we're finding out that that issue is, while it's important, it's not as important as the environmental impacts to people who have responded. So basically, they determined that in the NYSERDA studies that it wasn't feasible, but for a lot of technical reasons. One, the grid is not set up for it, and they recommended that the grid supply power through the terrestrial wind turbines. But also, the environmental impacts are completely unknown and wouldn't be. There is a bill pending, despite the results of these NYSERDA studies indicating that there was no feasible reason to run them. The results of the study indicated that it shouldn't go any further. However, within months of that study, the wind turbine industry met with Senator Pete Harcum in Westchester County, and within weeks of that meeting, he proposed another project to actually look at the feasibility of doing a smaller 250 megawatt project out towards this end of the lake in the deeper waters. It doesn't seem possible that it could be, after 2 studies, that would be possible, but apparently it is. And our goal is to fight that. And Patty will talk about the details of that.
I'm going to stand up here. So what our Cottle group has done, we have gone town to town, board to board, in Chautauqua County, and I'll hold this up a little bit, and speaking to all of our supervisors, our mayors, and asking them to pass a resolution. Now, the towns that are here in red are all the towns that have passed a resolution in Chautauqua County. The ones down here in white, I have the town of Gary and the town of Kyantone. They're scheduled to pass it at their next meeting. The other towns of, it's under advisement, and I just have one town of Harmony that he has just flat out said, no, it's not for them at this time.
So 74%.
74%. We have Senator George Borrello. We've been working closely with him. Senator George Borrello drafted a bill, and he did have it in the Senate. He presented it in the Environmental Committee, and then his bill was not voted in. But like Dave was saying, 1 week after, the lobbyist had approached Senator Pete Harcum, Westchester County, clear across the state, that has nothing to do with Lake Erie, and he wants to put a pilot program to put turbines in the lake, just to see how it's going to go.
40 to 60 of them.
And this would be, you put one in, and they have to jet plow from the shoreline all the way 8 miles out, times 100 turbines, 100 feet deep, and you're talking a lot of disruption in that lake bed, which will cause the contamination in our lake. It's just not good common sense. It will destroy our lake. And in a time that we're watching our budgets in each town, in each county, it is just not, it's not right. It's not feasible. It's not something we should entertain. So this is why Cottle is proactive. We can stop it before it started. And so we're here to ask that the county pass a resolution in opposition of opposing wind turbines in Lake Erie. Now, when we finish with, we're all here with Chautauqua County, and we're hoping that Chautauqua County, it's pretty close, and it looks like it could all go red. I understand that these towns in your county pretty much all work pretty much together. We've also gone to Erie County. We started with Erie County. We just have the towns in yellow that have not passed it yet. We're still working on it. We're working with the Erie County legislator. We have been in the Erie, in the Environmental Committee. We presented there, and they're taking a look at it. They're taking a good hard look at it. Tomorrow, again, they have an environmental meeting, and it's possible that it will come to a resolution in Erie County. So after we're all finished with this, our intentions are to take these resolutions to the governor and say, we the people of Erie and Chautauqua County do not want turbines in the lake. We are proactive. We're not asking for any money. We're not a lobbyist group. We're just simple people that care about our lake and want to be proactive and protect it forever. So I thank you for the opportunity. And does anyone have any questions?
Anybody in committee have any questions? Mr. Larson?
Mr. Adrian, your last name's Adrian?
Yes.
Just so I'm clear, from your perspective and background, you're not against land-based turbines?
It's funny because in the process of looking at this, when we saw wind turbines in Lackawanna for the first time, I think we all thought, wow, we're now becoming cutting edge, and we knew nothing about it. In the process of learning about this, we're finding a lot of reasons to fight that battle as well in terrestrial situations. However, we have to focus our efforts on what we can do and change. So we only talk about this, but we hear from so many groups. There are now 231 groups in America that are fighting wind turbines in both terrestrial and aquatic situations. Most of them are in terrestrial situations.
So if our energy in New York is not going to come from wind, hopefully it doesn't
We also looked into that because it's a real common question. Well, what alternative have you looked at? Our electrical engineers who have worked in the industry have done exhaustive research on small modular nuclear. And the advantages of those are they can be, being module, a municipality can find its own. It's not an aquatic situation, but they can exactly determine how large of a system they need. And being modular, they can plug in these multiple modular nuclear reactors no longer using uranium and the more dangerous and difficult to break down sources of fuel. And if one of the modules were to fail, for instance, then they can just take that out and replace it with another without even losing any power. They are currently producing them in the United States quietly because there is no subsidies for nuclear, or very little compared to wind and solar now. However, that's beginning to change. We just recently saw where the governor had a summit in Syracuse where they talked about for the first time an alternative to wind and solar, and because of some of the problems that they're finding with them. And nuclear was the first on the list for that. So it's beginning to shift that way. Right now, as I said, America sells these to Europe, who is about 20 years ahead of us. They've been through this. They see the pros and cons, and many of the European communities have completely abandoned aquatic systems for this reason. However, we are selling them nuclear systems, and it appears that they're having a lot of success with it. The initial cost is more, but the actual cost of production is less than wind and solar.
And on that score, I'm sure you saw in the news that 3 Mile Island is going to be restarted because there's a real demand for the 800 megawatts that nuclear reactor will put out 24 hours a day. Doesn't depend on sunshine or wind.
Yeah, I think the initial response was very reactionary to shut down all the other options, and they're talking about a transition now that it will include some nuclear or potentially even coal and natural gas.
Thank you.
Yep.
There's one thing that we didn't mention about these turbines are temporary. They have about a shelf life between 15 and 20 years, and blades have to be replaced, and then they're non-functional. And then the blades are driven out to New Mexico and Arizona and buried in the desert. The blades and parts of the turbine cannot be recycled. So it's a temporary problem to a permanent need for our energy. And we're hoping that with New York taking a look at that summit meeting, that it will go toward modular, because wind and solar are just not the answer. They're not sustainable enough for the energy.
Committee, have any questions? More questions on committee?
No questions, I just support you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, and if you can, if we have any, once these towns are passed, can you please let us know what's going on? Because I'm working with
Certainly.
the attorney now to try to throw something together for the county, but we need all the information we can get to do what we need to
Absolutely.
do. And I want to thank you very much for the presentation.
One thing I did want to mention, the city of Jamestown is working on theirs currently, and they're very much close to passing it, and they wanted you to know that they're pretty close.
Okay, great.
Chairman, is there any opposition? Is there any disagreement on our committee?
I don't, well, that's why I asked the question. I mean, because this presentation is, it's,
This is real.
it is real.
We live it every day. The colder temperatures are here.
You know.
You can't imagine relying on solar and wind where I live. I can tell you that for sure.
I live right on Lake Erie, so this is an issue for me. I don't want to see these things, so.
Our most common response is it's common sense, and we don't find it very polarized. Yeah.
Question, procedural, can we as a committee make a motion or to recommend to the legislature to hold that we issue such a letter of support?
I think Mr. Sagan has something to say.
Yeah, I believe what the chairman said was that he's working on a resolution for next month.
Right.
All right, so that's in process.
That's in process now with Christie, so we're working on that now. So I just want everyone to be aware of what's going on what they're trying to do, you know, and I think the presentation was warranted, because it's going to affect a lot of people. And not just those who live on the lake itself, it's gonna affect a lot of people. If 11 million people with drinking water, it's something we can't even mess with, so.
Right.
That's why I'm in favor of what you folks are doing,
Thank you.
so.
The interesting point, though, is someone across the state wants to pilot it. We're here.
I know.
Well, he's chairman of the environmental committee, so he chairs a lot of these decisions. But we've let him know that we don't appreciate somebody from that Senate state
Could you just go
dictating.
repeat his name for me, please?
Senator Pete Harkam, Harckham.
Thank you.
You're welcome. His bill is 7035.
All it needs is a matching assembly bill to move forward.
Downstate New York would like us to offset their carbon footprint. Makes them feel good.
Oh, sorry, just one other final point
Sure.
about the modular nuclear, zero carbon footprint.
That's important. Well, thanks,
Thank
folks,
you.
very much
Thank
for the
you.
presentation. I
Well,
appreciate it.
thank you for having us.
Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you. Well worth it. It's cool. This seems to conclude what's on the agenda. I'd be looking for a motion to adjourn. Second? Second, okay, adjourn. Thank you.
Sudden it got
It's over. They must shut the,
That used to happen at the workplace, and it'd be like 5:30.